welcome to the first ever Big Tuddies Fantasy Football Podcast, the only fantasy football podcast with balls. I'm your boy, Sammer, hanging out with Poppy Latte and Tiny Tony, as I like to call him, because that's what my phone corrected him to when I text him, and you're just going to have to deal with it, Tony. Before we get started, make sure you guys click on the socials at the bottom of the screen, and if you like this show, hit us with a like, a subscribe, and leave us a comment throughout the season. We need your comments because that's how we're going to answer fantasy football questions for you and help you to a winning season and hopefully a lot of tutties. Welcome to the first episode. This is what we're going to rock up today. We're going to go through what we call the Big Tuddies training camp. We're going to get you ready for the first fantasy football season if you're new or if you're trying to get your feet back in the game. So first things first, we're going to go with fantasy football rules, how important those things are. Tony, Latte, you guys run this show. I'm just here to keep it from, going astray too much. So we'll start with the fantasy football rules. Let these people know what they have to follow and how things need to be structured for them to actually be in a correct league.
No, I got to say first, Tony, before you start, because Tony's our expert here. I'm just calling. I'm just here. I'm taking a journey with you guys. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Tony's the expert, but I got to say, Tony, don't be so upset, bro. The best nicknames are, they're given, they're earned, they just come naturally. And listen, every dude that I know in a movie or in a book or in a novel or anything that's named Tiny, it's usually because they're fucking massive.
Yeah.
So it's fine. Just big dudes. So
yeah, just wait until I get a hold of Sammer's dictionary on his phone.
So Tony, rules. Let's go.
All right. So, first, definitely want to talk about your league types. You want to make sure that when you're getting into a fantasy league, make sure that you're paying attention to how your scoring is done. Is it going to be PPR, half PPR, standard, if anyone still does that? You want to pay attention to the number of owners. This can have an impact on how you draft. The least amount of owners in the league, the more your free agency pool is going to be stacked with good players. So you can take a couple of risks that you may not take in a broader league. If you got 12, 14 teams, now things are going to thin out real quick, so paying attention to that. You're also going to want to.
The flip side of that too, Tony, is when you're going with 10, because people think 10 seems to be easier. It's not. To me, in my experience, and you can correct me if you've had a different experience, Sam or Tony, 10 teams a little bit harder because everyone's team is stacked. So now you're playing the matchups, and if you're not paying attention to the matchups, happened to me last year, right? I had some players in that Niners Bears game when the monsoon week 1. I didn't pay attention. All of a sudden, my players did nothing because they played in the monsoon. So the matchups matter. It's not just that it thins out. If it's a smaller league, you got to pay attention to the matchups because everyone's stacked.
But you could also be in those crazy 10 leagues where you got the commissioner that knows nothing about fantasy football, and somehow everyone's allowed to have 25 bench spots. And then when it's time to actually pick someone up, which happened to me one time, I was in this league, I couldn't pick anyone up because there's so many bench spots that other teams just stacked guys and just left them there. So it was like almost like hoarding of a team, and that's a massive thing that I think you should look for. But I'm going to rewind Tony a little bit, just in case there's people who are joining us that have never played fantasy football or are still kind of new to this. Explain what PPR is. I know we know it, but let people know out there who maybe don't know what the terminology is. Explain what PPR is, because I know you touched on that, and just making sure that we make sure all these people are comfortable in their first time with some big tutties.
Sure. So yeah, we gotta keep in mind the acronym. So PPR is points per reception. Anytime someone catches the ball, they're going to get 1 point. So same thing is going to apply. Half PPR, obviously, it's a half a point each reception. That's also something that you want to pay attention to. When you start to break down your roster, you're looking at also, now I got running backs that catch the ball. Guys that are third down guys. They're going to be running out into the flat. Maybe they're a little emergency in case a play breaks down. They get that 1 yard reception. That's still a point, So some of your running backs, these guys that get peppered with targets all game, they may be more valuable than a Derrick Henry who, can just blast his way through the pile and get into the end zone. But there's not a whole lot of pass catching going on. So PPR leagues, you want to pay attention to that. It will actually change your draft list, slightly. You're going to want to pay attention to that, definitely.
All right, we got the rules out of the way. Now, the next thing, obviously, is getting ready for the draft. So the pre-draft process. Tony, Latte, kind of give what you guys like to put together as you get ready for your first draft or for any draft for fantasy football.
I think Tony mentioned earlier too. Sorry, Tony, I didn't mean to talk over you there, but I also want to talk because he talked about commissioners and co-commissioners and stuff like that pre-show. Before you move away from the rules, if you're playing for money or just fun, it's fun, right?
Play for money.
Play for money.
Play for money. What's the
play for money? Because people are invested. But speaking of playing for money, I don't care if you're playing with all family. I don't care if I'm playing with my son. If it's money, you're giving me the money before we draft.
Yes.
Money's due before the draft. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't care if it's your mom, bro. All of a sudden they don't draft a nice team and, their pockets get real sticky. They don't want to come up off that money. And then as the commissioner, I mean, if you set a prize for the winner, then you're holding the bag. And that's
that's why I say play for money too, is because when someone has skin in the game, they're going to try. If you have somebody, if you're real lax on everyone paying their dues, some guy, he's got something going on. He's trying to cook dinner while he's drafting or whatever. Now all of a sudden he ends up with a crappy squad. And 3 weeks into the season, he's 0-3. No, it's kind of hard to get a hold of him for his dues. Make sure people pay their dues and make sure they have some money on it. Because if you're playing in a free league, people just stop setting their roster when they don't do well. You got people that just have they may not even actually roster somebody. You're just playing a blank spot across from them in your matchup. You got to have something in it. Something in it.
Just to give you guys an example of that, Sammer and Tony, last year in the highly competitive league that I'm in, that's a high money league, entry league. We had a guy that stopped playing. He just was uninterested, had shit going on, and he paid a lot of money to get in, right? Even with skin in the game. And he did not set a lineup. He left like 3 people on bye week. The person he was playing got into the playoffs because he lost. He won. So in other words, if he would have lost the guy, if he just put his lineup in, he was projected to win him, to beat him. Because he didn't put a lineup in, the other guy won, made the playoffs, knocked somebody else out of the playoffs because of overall record, and it's bullshit. Imagine you're in the playoffs, and because some douchebag doesn't set his lineup, you get knocked out. There's.
I guess that's kind of
so a little bit of common courtesy. Common courtesy, even if your team is doing terribly, you have bad luck, whatever's going on. If you're not doing, you still gotta go in there and set your lineup. Just set it, even if you know you're gonna lose. Make it fair for everyone else in the league that you don't become a bye week for everyone who faces you. That's a big thing. That's a great point, Latte, because that's happened to me multiple times. And if and going back to that point about being in a league that pays, I will say, kind of away from that point, when I first started with fantasy football, I played in a bunch of free leagues aside from the couple that I was paying in, just so I could learn, so I could get better, so I could apply some stuff that I was learning when I was reading online. So, that's another side of the coin there. Free leagues aren't the end of the world, but obviously you want to be in competitive ones as well. But I used to use free leagues all the time just to learn and understand how it works and all that kind of stuff. But hopefully not a lot of people tuning in are brand new to that fact. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, if you're trying to cut your teeth, you're just trying. Obviously, you're pretty engaged. If you're trying to learn, you're interested in it, and that brings me to another point. Be a fan. Be a fan of the game. Enjoy football. Want to watch football. If it's a work league and a bunch of guys at work are like, "Hey man, you ever played fantasy football before? We got one more spot. We need one guy." If you're not going to keep up with it, you're not going to sit down on Sunday and put the time in. You're not going to watch highlights if you miss the games. But maybe fantasy football is not for you. But I mean, some of us take this real serious.
Yeah.
We're gonna get to that on the next point with the pre-draft stuff. Absolutely.
Well, let's go. Let's dive into it. Pre-draft. What are you guys doing to get yourselves ready for the draft? You guys are the fantasy football nerds on this show. I'm here to steer the ship. Either of you. So we'll start with you, Latte. What do you do pre-draft?
What do I do?
I'm looking at you, man.
Oh man, listen, I'm gonna tell you something. Tony knows this. Sammer knows this.
Besides sitting in front of the mirror,
I won the fucking. I should go get the trophy. The trophy's downstairs. I have a Lombardi in my living room right now. I won the championship last year in my big money league at work. Like Tony said, there's nothing better than a work league, bro. When you get to show up every day and it's like morning champ. It's like The champ is here. You're right, the champ. Every time they call me, champ, what's up? Yeah, feels great. But listen, I won the championship. That was what, January? I crap you not, guys. I'm not kidding. You want to talk about nerd and being in pre-draft? I was already mock drafting in March. I'm not joking. I was doing mock drafts.
How many mock drafts did you do this offseason?
Oh, my God. Easily over 500, 600 mock drafts. And I'm probably not even counting sleeper and all that stuff.
So this is something you got to check off. If you're going to take this seriously, your pre-draft has to include mock drafts.
Yeah, you don't have to do it that early. Not that early, but you have to run mock drafts before you get into your league. So you have to.
So let me ask you a question. Do you run your mocks from every position possible, or do you know your position going in the offseason? I'm going to probably be drafting fourth. Like, how does all that work? What's the best way to approach a mock draft?
So yeah, to kind of transition from the rules of fantasy over into pre-draft, so that's going to be predetermined. That whether you are or aren't going to know your position going into the draft. Some guys like to have fun with it, have a little contest, draw straws, whatever the case is. Some guys just do a randomizer. Some guys like to, commissioners like to keep it right before the draft. You might find out morning of the draft, this is where you're drafting from.
30 minutes before in some cases.
Yeah. Keep that in mind.
So how do you get ready for that?
Draft from all positions. Okay. Normally I'll kind of set it where I'll draft from the 1 spot in a mock, and then I'll draft from the 3 spot. I'll draft from the 6 spot. You don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 and try and just overload yourself with, okay, if I'm in the 7 position, I'm taking this guy in this round, but I gotta, this, that, and the other. But, space it out a little bit, have an idea of, basically you want to know what you're going to be looking at roundabout when you get like round 3. Okay, I'm going to be looking at this pool of guys most likely. You're going to have some wild cards in every draft. You're going to have some guys that, are going to take a kicker in the 5th round or something, and they're going to then you're going to have other players of value start to drop and slide down in the draft where you're going to be able to pick up some of that value later. There's always that weirdo that everybody wonders what the hell he's doing. But yeah, those mock drafts are important. And keep in mind also, again, going back to league rules, you want to pay attention to how your roster is structured. So when you look at your fantasy team in your platform, you're going to have a starting roster and then your bench. Your starting roster is going to be those guys that every week, those are the ones that are playing for points. Typically leagues are going to be set up 1 quarterback, 2 to 3 wide receivers, 1 to 2 running backs, a tight end, and then you're going to have what we call flex spots. Flex spots will allow you to do multiple positions. You can either do running back, wide receiver, or tight end in those. Some leagues play a super flex where you can put a quarterback in those positions. And then some leagues will still carry kickers and defense. But pay attention to that. If you have 3 wide receivers, 2 flex spots, and you're only starting 1 running back, you're going to want to go wide receiver heavy, especially if it's PPR. Those wide receivers are going to get those receptions. They're going to get those targets. So why not line up 5 wide receivers in my starting roster and 1 running back? I see the probability of more points in that scenario. So pay attention to that. Pre-draft, kind of have a game plan with your mocks. Okay, I'm looking for receiver heavy. So where's going to be the best value? And we'll talk about how to kind of set up your lists. You're definitely going to want to do tiered rankings. Poppy, you got anything to add to roster construction or any tips there?
Not roster construction, but pre-draft as well. Find yourself a source of information, right? Like a podcast like this one. Subscribe. We're going to be doing mock draft shows, ranking shows, reaction shows to who went off with a bunch of tutties. Find yourself a podcast or a source of information. And when you do, one tip that I can give to everyone that I've learned is if you find a show like this one, for example, stick with one. If you like Tony and you like the way Tony, has his rankings and the way that he digests and explains stuff, stick with Tony. If you like what I'm spitting, stick with me. If you like But where I got confused early on is I'd listen to some shows and I'd consume the content, and then I'd be listening to all of them. Then my head would be fucking spinning in 3 different directions. Lock in on one, lock in on a show, and just listen. We love to do this. It's fun. Like Tony said, it's supposed to be fun. So enjoy the content. Find a source of information, because that's going to help you a lot pre-draft. So when you go into mock drafts, now you can put into action what you heard and kind of practice in the kiddie pool before you go into the real draft.
Yep. Contrary to what usually happens when I'm on a podcast, where I'm always the smartest person on camera, in this case here on this show, I am absolutely not. I am
He's learning.
Second-year guy when it comes to fantasy football. I have played for many years. I just never have taken it crazy serious. I've never been a crazy nerd about it. So me being here as kind of a host of the show is fun in the sense that I get to kind of force you guys to talk to people who aren't as crazy about it, and helps me learn, but helps viewers also learn. So don't take any tip I give for the rest of this season with any value, because what I'm going to tell you is complete nonsense, and I will maybe say that just on purpose. So do not listen to me at all.
Hey, from the podcast that me and Tony have listened to in the past, don't take what I say with like written in blood either. Okay, it's just an opinion.
Yeah. None of this is guaranteed. This is all just educated guessing, really.
No. Yeah. I mean, Tony, last night you helped me out with my pre-draft process before I went in. I absolutely crushed it. Right, so I will say right now, Big Tuddies
has ever had.
Big Tuddies is my favorite fantasy football podcast, bar none. All right, I'm saying that right now.
See how that team does throughout the season.
I mean, come on.
And also having you here,
All-star.
There's going to be some questions and stuff that you can ask on the show that are going to help people out. That's something, this is a beginner's episode for people getting into fantasy, but there's also going to be some tips and stuff in here, little nuances for seasoned players. I'll go back and watch stuff that's a little more rudimentary, just to see if I could pick up little tips and things I may have never thought about before.
Yeah, wide receivers, veterans, and rookies got to work on fundamentals when they get into camp, right? It's normal. You always got to work on that. So before we wrap up pre-draft, is there anything else that seasoned vets or newcomers need to make sure they do before they get into that draft day?
I said at the top, just mock till you drop. Mock till you drop, because by the time you get to a real draft, it's just it literally becomes second nature. You can already, and Tony, I'm sure I speak for both of us, right? When you mock so much, when you get into a real draft, you know who's going to be there. And I'm not going to give my next tip, because that's part of my next the actual drafting, but you kind of see who's going to be there, Tony, if that makes sense.
You don't want to be that player that's sitting there with 13 seconds left on tilt trying to figure out who to draft. Running these mock drafts, Poppy, you got 500-600 mock drafts under your belt this offseason. I was definitely in triple digits. This is going to keep you informed. You're going to see the evolution of average draft positions as preseason goes on. As training camp buzz happens, all these guys are gonna be moving up and down. You got little hamstring tweaks. Somebody pulls their groin. Now they're moving down. You're gonna see that as you go through these mock drafts. You're gonna see those players slide up or slide down, and that's gonna help you kind of mold and stay confident and fresh in the draft. I love knowing who my picks are, to the point where I got somebody on either side of me that I know they're starting to stress. Maybe they're feeling the clock the last couple of rounds. As soon as I'm up, bam, draft. I got my player. They're on the clock right now. And they're like, oh, man, they thought they had some time. Now the clock's ticking. Now you got that guy on tilt. Now you get, if it's a live draft or if you're online, now you get in that guy's ear. You start roasting him a little bit. Now he's getting even more tilted. I love it.
All right, so I mocked till I dropped. Go ahead.
I got one more, and this one might have been this one or the one before. Tony, you just brought up ADP. We talked about PPR. So we got PPR, ADP. PPR is point per reception. ADP, when you hear this term, it's average draft position. That's average where they're going, right? You have other, my God, why is my brain freezing? Sam is going to edit this. I don't fucking care. But you got ADP, you got ADOT, right? When you hear ADOT, that's average depth of target. So, like, if somebody has a high ADOT, that's good. If they have some low, is there anything else, Tony?
I would definitely say,
acronyms and stuff.
you touched on it as far as finding a source of information. I know a lot of people in fantasy preach this. Try and stay away from those top 200 lists. Poppy, you probably used to use those back in the day. Admit
I
it.
used to use those a lot back in the day. It's not good. It's just look at Sammer. Sammer's like guilty.
Yeah.
Well,
I used to have those. I used to have those magazines, dude. Pick them up on the way to a draft sometimes. That's how I wasn't crazy about fantasy football like you guys.
Top
So I would
200 just
pick it up on
ranks
the way.
them. It just ranks them, in top 200, right? It's extremely important. What Tony said, ranking, having tier-based rankings, because if you think you have to reach because you're about to take the last player of a tier and you're not going to get one, it's just important. It's a much more clear roadmap as opposed to just top 200. Oh, well, 97. No. Tier it. There's a lot of resources out there. There's a bunch of stuff. I purchased personally a draft kit that does all of that for me, and I can create my own tiers and my own lists. But they also have it done for you, so you can just go in and just look at all the tiers and mark players as they're getting drafted. Because when you're in a live draft, make no mistake, like Tony said, you're getting roasted. Guys are watching you. You don't know pressure until you're on the clock in front of 15 other people, and it's like, I'll take Godwin, and they're like, you fucking idiot, you took Godwin. That's pressure, man. Amongst your peers,
nothing wrong with taking Godwin.
You know what
at
I
any
mean?
point in the draft,
I
all
can't
right?
think of another. Godwin's going to be fine. He's going to be great.
But listen, for all of you who are
That's
new,
real pressure.
or obviously you're all new because this is a brand new podcast.
Look at my freaking background, okay?
Slap that subscribe button, hit the like for us. That'll help this channel grow, and it'll help this podcast grow. And hopefully, heading into next season, we'll be the ones releasing those cheat sheets per se and those draft kits with those big tutties all over the front of those. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to hopefully get to that point, help you not only win your league as we're doing this season, but help you win the draft. And that brings us kind of naturally into the next point, which is you mocked till you dropped. You've gotten all the draft kits in your hand. You're ready to go. Here I am, brand new fantasy football guy. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm entering my first draft. Tony, help me draft. Go.
Okay.
We kind of rolled into it already with the tier stuff. Yeah, we were talking about it.
We're in it. That's what I'm
So
saying.
we got the list. We're going into the draft. Now, the big question is, what type of draft are we going to have? Are you doing live or are you doing online? Either one's fun. Either one's getting you into fantasy football. But if you have the chance to live draft, get your friends together, get everybody together, have some drinks, cook out, there's nothing like getting everybody together, especially once you're a few seasons deep. Now you got the loser coming into the live draft. Like Poppy said, you got the champ. Somebody's coming in, waving the trophy.
That was me holding a sign. Sorry, won't focus. With a sign that says, "I suck at fantasy football. I started 0-13. Ask me how I finished." That was my punishment. That's what live drafts do. It's a beautiful
rough.
thing.
So is there a game plan to having an advantage by hosting the draft? Like making sure everybody's fingers are kind of greasy when you serve wings? Is there kind of a little deviousness that you kind of go into there? I feel like
that'd be the only time I allow boneless wings, Sammer, because I'm not getting my fingers fucked
and
up.
You kind of have a home field advantage. You know where the good Wi-Fi spots are in the house. You have your guys that you don't want to win. You put them in the corner. Yeah, dude. Yeah, you get Wi-Fi on the outside of the patio there. Yeah, at the very corner of the pool. No problem. Yeah.
Listen,
home field
Sammer,
advantage. I feel like that's what I want. Right?
I may or may not. My biggest nemesis in the UPS league is a super lightweight, and I may or may not have bought him 2 drinks before the draft.
See, there you go.
It's all free game, bro. And he was saucy. He was Clyde Edwards in the 4th round. It was like, it worked.
Right. So I've been in a couple live drafts like that where it was when I worked at a place years and years ago, and they would insist that we would do it at this local bar, and they would get the back room and everything would be set up. But a lot of them were like heavy drinkers. So by like round 4 or 5, half these guys were just gone, and it was just a free for all. And I was like, oh sweet. So I'm just picking out great players here in the 6th round, 7th round. Nobody's paying attention. Guys are laughing at everything. I'm like, okay, cool. So all right. So there's some game planning when it comes to the live draft side.
That's when you get that guy that's like, yo, I just got Bijan in the 9th round. Like, no, that's Brian Robinson.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention, buddy.
You were drunk, sir. You were drunk.
Yeah, that was not Bijan on the 9th. I'll give one more. So tiers, we hit that. Live versus online. If you're gonna do live, make sure you get yourself a draft kit. Don't do the 200, the top 200. Don't do that. Don't do that. Everyone on my draft had the top 200, and I was laughing at everyone. I was literally like Anchorman. We are all laughing at you because I was on my phone. Real neat, real simple.
So they're not completely useless, but it's just top 200 lists kind of give me an idea of like, all right, with average draft position, this is probably where people are going to start taking quarterbacks. That's probably about the best use of it. Other than that, your draft is going to be a little more fluid. You got to pay attention to your roster, how it's coming together. The value that you take at the top of the draft is going to kind of determine how you're going to finish. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but there's different strategies on how to draft. If you're going to go real heavy on one position early, if you're going to completely punt a position to the end of the draft. So we'll get into that a little bit.
So that's kind of my question, Tony. Like when you go into a draft, are you going in with, you've mocked enough so you kind of understand how the players will fall for the most part, especially if you know what position you're going to be in. So you have a good idea of what is probably going to be your first pick, maybe even your second pick. But are you going in there, like when we talk about NFL teams, best player available? Or are you going in with, let's fill my roster from top to bottom with starters and then start building my bench? Or is it, like you said, just get as many powerful players and point producers as possible right off the bat?
So I would say you're definitely going to want to take the best player available for your roster construction. So what I mean by that is some people say take best player available. You could end up 4 running backs in the first 4 rounds if that's the only strategy you're taking. So what you want to do is you want to pay attention to, when I start off my draft, you should know your first, second round picks. You've done enough mock drafts at this point. These guys are going to be here. So if you're the guy sitting there taking 2 minutes in the second round, come on, buddy. Like, let's go.
That's why I like those drafts are only 30 seconds on the clock. It's like boom, in and out. You should know what you're doing at this point.
Sure. I mean, that can be a little tough sometimes. You're like, oh, I went to go grab a beer. You come back, it's like, meep.
All 60 seconds.
Meep. Oh. Yeah. But, so yeah, when you go into the draft, you're going to take the best player available for your team. So if I've got 2 wide receivers to start, now I'm probably looking at running back, but I also like to look at quarterback and tight end early sometimes. This is something that I like to preach a lot about those single starting positions. Some people call them one-off positions.
Onesies.
Onesies, where you're only starting 1 quarterback. You're only starting 1 tight end. Most likely. Most people aren't going to start a tight end in their flex. So that can be a very small talent pool in those positions. So when you're looking at quarterback, you're looking at tight end, like tight end especially. Okay, that one's a great example. We all know who the studs are at tight end. Obviously, you got Zeus. He's been number 1 tight end at the end of the year. How many years in a row now, Poppy? 5?
5 years, I think. It just doesn't stop. You can't.
Did Andrews jump in there 1 year?
1 year, I think.
But you've got this upper echelon of tight ends that you got your Kelsey, you got your Andrews. There's a couple other guys that are starting to be a little more consistent week to week. But other than that, once you get past those first few guys, then it drops off a cliff. Now you're just hoping that a guy gets in the end zone this week, because he's probably going to go, 2 for 17 and a touchdown. If you're lucky, that's a decent week for some of those, for that last 8 tight ends, that are going to be starting in your league. So if you can grab one of those top tier guys, now all of a sudden you've won that position. That matchup for the week, your tight end versus their tight end, you can almost guarantee I've got that locked up. I'm going to get a little bit of padding from that position. So now, even if I had to try and find some value on running back later on in the draft, I've got that extra pad of 3 to 7, maybe even 10 points at my tight end position over my opponent, that now my last flex position doesn't have to be as strong. Maybe I can take a flyer on a guy that has upside of exploding this week and maybe get me a big play bonus or something like that. What do you think, Poppy?
I think Tony's definitely right with that. Taking one of those tight ends is definitely a cheat code, and you know, the Kelseys, the Andrews, the Wallers. Waller's going to get super targeted this year, but it automatically gives you a leg up, right? Because we're fans of football. We all consume and love football, but you know, we love our tight end for our team. But the reality is that as it relates to fantasy football, they're not that valuable. There's only 2-3 guys every year that are like the top guys. Other than that, if I don't get one of those guys early, which I tend to not to, I just don't like to take tight end that early. I go by the late or great. So if I'm going to take one, I'm going to take one late, or I'm going to take a great one. I don't like to take a great one. I just wait. And then you just stream the position. And what I mean by streaming for the new guys out there is, you're just playing the matchups, and you're picking up a tight end every week, playing the matchups. Like Tony said, find yourself a source of information online, and you can go on and find the information. What team is giving up the most receptions to tight ends? What teams are giving up the most touchdowns to tight ends? So on and so forth. But that's how I play it. As it relates to the draft, though, I did want to say something, Tony. Sammer asked it, and that's to, you have to be fluid. You have to be like water. You can't be committed when you do these mock drafts like, I'm getting Saquon, I'm getting Saquon, I'm getting Saquon, I'm getting Saquon. Because what's going to happen is somebody's going to take Saquon right before your pick.
Gonna have Saquon.
Then you're going to panic.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to be water. My pick, I mocked it with, I had the 12th pick because I won this year. So I went double receiver. I went receiver tight end. I went receiver running back. I did all kinds of scenarios, so I was prepared for anything. And the last thing I want to say, as far as the tiers and stuff like that, sometimes when you're on either end of the draft or in the middle, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're fans, right? We consume this and we play this because we love football and we love to watch football, all that. No, I'm just saying at certain times, and Tony would agree, if you want a player, you have to understand that they're not going to make it back. So sometimes you have to reach. Have fun. I'm not telling you to take fucking Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd round. That's ridiculous. What I'm saying is if you have to reach by a round on a player, maybe a round and a half, maybe two.
Well, this year it is.
This year it is. Just do it. At the end of the day, you're having fun. It's football. So take your guys. If you like your guy, take your guy.
That's what I was going to say to the point that you guys made about mock drafts earlier. Sorry, Tony, was when you've mocked so many times, you're going to have favorites. You're like, I want to try to get Jefferson. I want to try to get Chase early. And, if I'm picking 3rd or 4th, I want to try to get Chase, and then I have kind of an idea of what I want, but you do so many mock drafts that you're like, okay, in a couple of those scenarios, you don't get Chase, and you have what you consider your backup plan, and then you have your backup to your backup plan, to where you're like, okay, if this doesn't work out, I'm still going to end up with a decent roster because I could follow this game plan. So I will say that, but I also wanted to note something that Tony gave me an awesome tip yesterday, which was what you called stacking. Is that what you were calling it yesterday? Definitely go into that, because in the draft, that is a massive thing. And also, just to remind you guys, something I learned the first time I ever played fantasy football, bye weeks matter. That's kind of a thing you should be watching for during the draft, I guess. Didn't know about that, but so I'll let you kind of touch on those points of both of you guys of what stacking is and how to make sure you pay attention to that bye week thing in that one column on the draft board.
I'll let Tony go into the stacking part, but I'll just say it real quick. Bye weeks matter, but I don't let it affect the way I draft. I'm not going to pass on a monster running back.
But you're not going to draft 3 wide receivers that are all going you the same bye week.
That's sure, yeah. You don't want to be completely empty at a position.
Not on purpose.
Correct.
But if JSN is sitting there in the 13th, whatever, dude. I'm not letting bye weeks determine. It matters. I pay attention. I peek at it, but it's not something that's the end all and be all for me.
But I will say it does matter too.
People take it super serious.
It does matter. It doesn't matter where the bye week falls. So if you don't have to worry about a bye week in one position until week 13, hell yeah. That ended up happening to me last night. I had 2 guys. I'm like, well, it's fine. I don't got to worry about that position until week 13. Absolutely, give me that dude right now. All right, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, chances are by week 13. Something's probably going to change anyway, and like Poppy said, I feel the same way. I really don't let it affect the way I draft too much as far as bye weeks go. You don't want to have too many, or I've even seen some people just shoot the moon, and just okay, there's what we call each year there's Bye-Mageddon. You'll have 1 or 2 weeks of the year where there's a ton of teams on bye, just more than usual. And unfortunately, it typically ends up where those teams have a lot of studs on them. So you end up with a lot of talent all off in 1 week. You know, if you go 12-1, you know,
That's okay.
because of it, this is not a huge deal. If I got to take an L that week because I got a bunch of guys on buys and I'm playing scrubs from
That's my
the
philosophy.
bottom of my bench, then maybe that's the way you go, you know. But don't put too much faith in it. Yeah, try not to have your quarterback, your tight end, and 2 receivers all on bye in the same week. It's probably going to be rough to overcome. Getting into stacking is a strategy that, you know, they found statistically now. Stacking a position, like your stacks are going to be done with a quarterback. So quarterback and another skill position from the same team, same professional team. So like Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, that's one of the best stacks that anybody could wish for. You know, that offense runs through Kelce. Mahomes is great. So when you have,
Hey Tony, you know, just interjecting here. Can you imagine if you had the Tom Brady Moss stack? I was thinking about the dude.
Somebody
That
had
year,
it.
Randy Moss had 25 touchdowns and Brady had what, 50? Like, can you imagine if you had you won the league.
I had Brady that year. I had
always-
Brady that year. I didn't have Randy though, but I did have Brady that year.
I always think about, like, because I always play big play leagues. So big play leagues, you know, you have a point bonus for when a player gets a 40+ yard touchdown, and then a lot of times you also have another big play bonus for a 50+ yard touchdown, and those will both accrue if they get the 50 because they're going 42, right? So you're getting 2 big play bonuses. I always think about, what if I had Randy during that Thanksgiving game?
Oh my
But
god,
the 3 for 1, what was it, 156 and 3?
it's ridiculous.
He won
3
your week
catches
by
for-
himself. That is the most unrealistic statistic I've ever heard of. If anyone
three what?
ever
Three what, Tony?
bests that, 3 for 156 or 158, it was 150 something. and
Every
3
every
touchdowns.
reception was a
3
touchdown.
catches.
Three
touchdowns.
3 tutties, buddy. 3 tutties.
Unreal.
3 tutties, not touchdowns. I don't know what a touchdown is. 3
We don't
tutties.
call them touchdowns here. We call them tutties. That's why this show's called Big Tuddies Fantasy Football Podcast. Because at the end of the day, if you listen to these 2 nerds, they're going to make sure that you score a lot of tutties on Sunday, maybe Saturday, Thursday, and Monday as well, obviously. But you know,
Listen.
you know what I mean.
There's nothing that I want more. It's my mission to make sure you score tutties.
Absolutely.
So more, just to elaborate more on the stacking. So you're going to draft a quarterback, and you're trying to also stack them with their heaviest target on the team. And what that does is your team's going to have more of a probability of blowing up any given week. So obviously when that receiver, you know, say you got Jalen Hurts, you got AJ Brown catches a bomb touchdown, boom, boom. You're getting 2 big jumps from 2 positions on your starting roster. I mean, not only is that extremely disheartening for your opponent to watch them just get buried under a huge point rush
on one game too, not over the entire Sunday, on one game.
Bro, there's nothing worse
breaks your
than
heart.
looking at your pre-draft stuff and you're setting your lineup and you're looking across the way, and like you said, you're looking at Jalen Hurts and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, oh my God, if AJ catches a couple bombs, I'm in trouble, which he's perfectly capable. He did it a lot last year. I had the smaller stack. Last year I had Jalen Hurts and Goddard, and it worked beautifully for me.
Dude,
So-
imagine McNabb and T.O. or Carson Palmer and Ocho Cinco. Like
Stupid.
those types of years. I mean, I don't know who was throwing the ball to T.O. in Dallas, but that guy. Oh, was it Romo? Yeah, Romo and T.O. Romo, T.O. and what's his face? Can't remember his name.
Dude, Aaron Rodgers,
Marquez?
Devontae Adams for like
Oh, yeah,
4 years.
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, there we go. Tons of them.
Go ahead, Tony. Finish your
Oh
point.
yeah,
son.
AB and Ben for a lot of
Yeah.
years was crazy. You know, throwing 4 to 6 tutters a game, like just
No, Tony.
it
Not
gives
tutters.
you.
It's tutties. All right, tutters
Hey,
sounds
man.
like udders. Sounds like you're milking a fucking cow. That's disgusting. Those are too big. Those are
too big.
You want tutties, all right? So that, like, if you say
Perfectly
tutters or
proportioned
touchdown,
tutty.
like, I'm probably never coming back to the show. And without me, this show doesn't exist.
All right. So we'll chop all that.
No, we're not going to chop any of that.
Go ahead.
But yeah, so you know, that's just going to give you a little leg up. Not that it's absolutely necessary, but it does, statistically, it does show it's going to give you the advantage throughout the year. And don't force it. You know, don't pick up the third string receiver to stack with your quarterback or anything. At that point, you're going to take best available. But stacks can significantly help if you can structure them properly.
Hell yeah.
I like it.
Anything else we need to worry about in the draft room?
Huh?
That seems to be it. All right, cool. So we'll kind of move on to post-draft / in-season moves. I'm assuming there's some stuff that goes down after the draft. I'm not a big post-draft guy other than kind of looking at everyone's rosters and kind of assessing what I got going on around me. But you guys are the experts here, so I'm going to ask you, we'll start with you, Latte. Post-draft, what are the first couple things you're doing same night, right then and there?
First off, it's not necessarily what I'm doing. It's what I'm not doing and not paying attention to. Don't pay attention to stupid grades, right? Yahoo gave me a D- last year, and the guy who got the A+ finished last with only one win, and I won the championship. Those stupid grades they're never correct.
So don't listen to IBM Watson at all. Don't listen to Watson. Got it.
Do not.
All right.
And then this is not necessarily a post-draft thing that I do immediately, but don't pay attention to those grades, and it's not how you draft, right? That the real season starts after you draft. Tony, this was how I started my championship draft last year. Eckler, Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton, Darnell Mooney, Schultz, Javonte Williams. Based off that, is that team winning the championship?
Mm-mm.
Mike Williams disappeared for 8 weeks. Mike Evans disappeared for 7 weeks. Love him, but Tom wasn't throwing the ball. Fuck you, Tom. Cortland Sutton was an absolute nightmare, right? Nightmare.
Yeah.
Darnell Mooney did nothing, and then I think he got hurt. Javonte got hurt. Week 1, he caught 13 balls. Tony talked about that PPR. Huge, right? Point per reception, caught 13 balls. He had 13 points just on catches, not yardage and touchdowns. Awesome. Then he gets hurt, the second game of the year, gone.
Out for the season. Yeah.
Out for the season. So the real season starts after that. Your free agency wire, pay attention to that. Your trades. Tony talked about it earlier. Make sure you're in a league with friends, man, that are actually going to be engaged and participating. There's nothing worse than playing in a league where nobody freaking responds. You send a trade and it just sits there for 6 weeks and not even a FU, just nothing. So make sure you're in a league that's active, because that's what's fun. That's really what the essence of fantasy football is for me. It's the BS in between games, in between Sundays, where you're talking trades. Hey, Tony, this, and it's like, oh, that's an insult, and the back and forth. That's what fantasy football is for me. So, 1, don't be disheartened by the draft grades, because it means nothing. And 2, the real season starts after that. I just gave you guys my championship team, how I started, and based off of my first 6 picks, no way in hell I was winning the championship. I ended up trading for Keenan Allen, and I traded for Dallas Goedert, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm back. So,
yeah, I mean, you're gonna build a good foundation at the draft. You know, you want to go in prepared. You know, and that's something that we've been reiterating throughout this whole training video for fantasy, is that you're gonna be prepared. You know, don't get caught off guard. Same thing when you sit down for your draft. You know, make sure you got your laptop charged up. You got your plug is ready. You got your notes. You know, I still to this day, I still keep a pad and paper so I can jot down, you know, who's the idiot, who's drafting weird. You're always gonna have that guy that's taking positions way early. You know, you can notate who has a quarterback already, so you can play that game of letting someone drop to you. You know, if you're in a 12-team league and you're at the 10 spot, excuse me, and you're coming around, you're on your short turn meaning that you're going from 10th to 11th position, then to 12th and snaking back around. So you've only got 4 picks in between your next pick. If those 2 guys behind you already have quarterbacks and I don't have a quarterback yet, but I see another skill set player that I like, I'll go ahead and grab them, because chances of those two guys taking a backup right now in the middle rounds is pretty slim. So I'm going to play that game and grab my quarterback then. So I'll keep little notes and just jot down, like, okay, team 7 has this, team 9 has their tight end. Be prepared. Going out of the draft, once you get into your season, another thing you want to do is, again, be first. Go to those sites that have that news and set notifications. Go to your apps and set notifications, so you're getting notified. You're not just coming to your phone 3 hours later and going, oh man, I didn't see that so-and-so got hurt in camp. He's on his way to surgery. Set your notifications, get the news, and stay on top of it. Dummy check, always dummy check your rosters. Poppy, you ever done that where you forget and you go and you look at your roster at like 12:45 before the Sunday game start? You're like, oh crap, I forgot to stream my defense or whatever.
Yeah,
always dummy check.
100%. 100% on that. I've left people in there that have been injured or last minute or out. Pay attention to all that stuff. What Tony said as far as the information, find you something, Adam Schefter, somebody, Twitter, something, and set notifications, because that stuff matters. I've noticed that the years where I haven't been as engaged, life happens, guys, right? This is fun. This is supposed to be a distraction from life, but sometimes life happens, right? I'm a husband, I'm a father. Shit gets in the way. I've noticed on the years where I haven't been able to be as focused or as locked in, I haven't been as successful. On the years where I'm paying attention to my notifications, so-and-so's hurt, let me go pick up his backup, I'm actively working the wire and paying attention to injuries. I've had way more success, and that's what happened last year, because clearly my start wasn't great. I did want to add something, guys, that we didn't touch on, Tony.
But before you do that, Latte, I was going to say a great place to do that and set notifications is on Twitter. When you follow us, Big Tuddies on Twitter, follow us, because we're going to drop as much information as possible throughout the season.
Injury updates.
When injuries happen, when guys are in and out of lineups, when guys have returned from suspension. That's another big one people don't think too much about. So we're a great follow. If you don't like Adam Schefter, or you hate his face or his voice, or you don't want to support big business, whatever the hell it is, follow us. We got
Support
you.
us.
Yeah. Go ahead, Latte.
One that I didn't touch on, Tony, was we didn't touch on the draft that I think it's important to touch on. On those onesie positions, your quarterbacks, your kickers, your defenses, etc. Pay attention to the trends, because sometimes I will take skill position players until it hurts, until it literally hurts, and I just will not take a quarterback. I won't take a defense. I'll just wait. But sometimes you would be doing a disservice to yourself if you don't pay attention to the trends. If in round 6, round 7, all of a sudden you see 3-4 quarterbacks come off the board, now you got to start looking at those tiers that Tony talked about, because it's musical chairs, and you don't want to be the guy sitting without a chair.
That's true. You also,
trends.
Again, going back to just being fluid,
Zig when they zag. Yeah.
Sometimes you're not always going to want to follow a run on a position. If you're trying to get one of those top tier quarterbacks and there's a run, you consider 6 quarterbacks to be the upper echelon, and there's 4 just went off the board in the last 6 picks, you might want to grab one. But sometimes those runs help you out. Sometimes those guys taking all of one position leaves huge value at another position. So pay attention to that too. You might want to punt that quarterback to the end of the draft. If you really want to dig
against Tony, I'm going to interrupt you. Yeah, I don't care, because against Tony, it happened to me in our league. The quarterback run started early, and me and Tony were like, the designated experts were like, we're gonna wait. I'm gonna wait, because I'm a gangster. I'm all gas, no brakes. I'm gonna wait on quarterback. In the 6th round, I'm like, okay, this is where I can, the threshold of pain isn't that much. I'm gonna see there's 2 left in the tier. I'm gonna go after my guy, and I had Justin Herbert and freaking Trevor Lawrence queued up, ready to go, and back to back right before me. The guy before Tony took Herbert, and Tony took Trevor Lawrence. So I go back to musical chairs. I was sitting in the 6th round looking at Daniel Jones. That's an ugly place to be.
Sometimes these things are going to change from year to year, So if you really want to dig deep, you really want to get nerdy and make sure you're just scooping in tutties. It's check the variance of a position. You know, not so much this year. We're seeing somewhat of an evolution in a few positions in football. Some skill set positions that the players are getting smaller, faster. Quarterbacks are becoming more mobile. You know, things are kind of evolving a bit. But in previous years, you know, say 6 years ago, if you looked at the quarterback position, the variance in points at the end of the year between the guy that finished as the number 1 quarterback in fantasy versus the guy that finished in the number 10 or number 12, depending on how many teams you have in your fantasy league, there wasn't that many points in that variance, you know, maybe 50 points. So in the grand scheme, at the end of the year, you could make well over 50 points in other skill set positions. So you may not want to value scooping one of those early quarterbacks as much, you know, so you can pay attention to that too. Yeah, so don't always follow the runs. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it benefits you to not. What else? We want to also your roster starting in the week. You know, little tips as far as things can happen. You know, like we mentioned, socials are great for news. I use socials a lot. I also, in the past, have used players' personal socials. You know, you got a guy that gets hurt, he gets a high ankle sprain, you know, maybe 4 to 6 weeks he's going to be out. I'm probably going to go follow that guy on X or on Instagram and see what he's doing. You know, if 3 weeks from now, he's still got his leg kicked up on the arm of the couch and ice on it, and he's watching, you know, Netflix, then chances are he's going to go the full 6 weeks. If I see that guy out at the beach, he's running around playing frisbee, doing whatever, ankle looks fine. Now I've got an idea, like, okay, he's probably going to be back early. So you can even use players' personal accounts to kind of tell how they're dealing with injuries, where their mindset's at, you know, how they feel. Do they have that hunger and that drive to get back out there right away and start helping the team? Excuse me.
I don't know what X is. You mentioned X. I have no idea what X is. And yeah, guys, listen, fantasy football can get creepy. I follow players as well. No shame. I'm trying to fucking win.
Oh, and as far as injuries go, you know, a little tip about your roster. This is something you'll want to keep in mind when you dummy check going into Thursday's game. You know, things can happen to guys at practice. So if you have an early game, if you have somebody playing on Thursday, take them out of your flex position. Put them in their actual skill set position. You know, that way, in case that someone that plays on Sunday, late Sunday, Monday, something happens to them in training camp, now you have that flex position. You have a little more freedom. You can use a wide receiver, a running back, or hopefully not, but maybe have to use a tight end to get some points on the board that week, so you don't lose, you don't completely miss out and end up with a goose egg there.
So we've kind of naturally shifted.
What's wrong with plugging in Kate Otten to a flex? He's going to be a beast, bro. What's wrong with that?
I like it. Hey, he went undrafted in my league last night. So, and we've kind of naturally transitioned into the last part of the show here, and that's pro tips. Pro tips heading into the season from Tony, from Latte, things that you guys want to think about. That tip right there at the end, too. I've never thought about that. I've never considered moving that player into his actual position
that's clutch,
to give me that flex option, because I have been screwed because I'm like, I'm definitely not going to take any of these guys out. I need to just put him in flex position, and I get screwed when he does or does not play, and it messes me up because then I'm stuck. So that's an awesome tip. But I'll let you guys kind of close out the show with a few pro tips heading into the season to help people watching score some big tutties. I don't know what you said earlier, Tony. You said scoop some tutties. No. Have you ever touched tutties? Do you even understand how they work? You don't scoop tutties. Squeezing them? Yeah, squeeze some tutties. Play with some tutties. Bounce some tutties. Hell yeah. Throw some tutties in your face. That's fine. But I don't know about scooping them. Not sure what you're doing, man. That's kind of weird.
They can be scooped.
No, they cannot.
As long as they've been blessed enough, they can be scooped. All right, pro tips. What you got, Poppy?
For me, so mine is a little more towards the draft. But it's still one of mine. Swing for the fences, man. When you get late in the draft, don't go safe. Don't go safe, because it literally safe is just gonna be a guy you're gonna end up cutting anyways. Mm-hmm. Swing for the fences on a young rookie, explosive, Last year I took Jameson Williams late, and it didn't work out great, but you could see how explosive he was towards the end of the year. Swing for the fences. You're not trying to hit singles and doubles late. You're trying to hit home runs. You're trying to
late in the draft, try and follow that upside opportunity or money. Where the team spends their money is going to tell you most likely that's where the ball's going. Opportunity is always going to be king. You can have a running back that's only 3 yards a carry, but if he's getting 30 carries a week, that's some points. That's a good point. Swing for the fences, go for upside. If they don't work out, 3 weeks, drop them, pick up. Now you got fodder for the waiver wire. Somebody that does pop up and it comes out of nowhere. It happens every year. Some guy just no one knew his name, came up from training camp because so and so, hurt their shoulder. Wow, here comes the next big star.
Here comes Trey Palmer.
Who knows?
100%.
Right?
Yeah. And so another tip you gave me last night. Go ahead, Latte. I'll do mine afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Another one Sammer talked about it pre-show. Another one that I don't always do it, but I did it in my big money league draft this year. I punted at kicker. There's nothing wrong there's nothing wrong with adding another home run potential player, right? And like Tony said, pay attention to the last couple of weeks of preseason. Pay attention to the news, what's going on. This guy's getting more burn. On all of those apps, it'll tell you as well how many targets they had. That's important. If a guy had 15 targets but only had 3 catches, but he had the targets, that means they're trying to throw him. They're trying to actively get on the ball. But back to my point, I punted a kicker, and I took 2 defenses. I knew I took the homer pick. I wanted the Bucs defense. That's my team. They're going to be good. I like the defense, and I like my team. But I punted a kicker, and I picked up Washington's defense. Why did I pick up Washington's defense, Tony? Because you have to pay attention to the matchups. Who do they play week 1, Tony?
I think they're going to have a few picks. I think they're going to have a few picks that first week against the Arizona Cardinals,
who just traded or cut their backup quarterback. I've never seen a team more actively in front of everyone tank than the Cardinals.
What are they doing?
I don't know. I don't know. The NFL's not even
they're
doing it.
making sure they lose every game that they play is what they're doing. I was going to say, to your point, Latte, the few years that I've actually won a league championship, I use this one tactic. I use it with my kickers. If I find a kicker that's, whatever, he does what he's supposed to do, I'll try to swap him in and out, whatever. But on defense, I will purposely not draft the defense, and I'll just switch defense week to week based on who is playing the worst possible offense on the waiver wire. And it works wonders for me. Sometimes you land with a team that ends up going on a little bit of a run, Steelers defense, Dolphins back in the day, whatever it is. But I've used that tactic on defense to just pick up the team that's playing the Arizona Cardinals every single week. And you're probably going to do pretty well.
Sammer?
You can't do that.
I did that this year, and Tony knows the story famously. Dude. I did that this year when I won the championship. Swear to God. I streamed defenses. I picked up New England's defense based off matchups. They scored me 40 points on one week. It was stupid. So I held them for a little bit. But then talking with Tony, you're going to talk with friends. That's what fantasy football's about. And you get advice and you kick stuff around with everyone, right? I'm like, Tony, what do you think of the Chargers, man? They're playing the Rams. The Rams, Matthew Stafford's gone. He's like, man, I pick them up and stash them. I picked them up. I stashed them. And in the second round of the playoffs, I shit you not, I was down like 42 points or more, 50 points, some shit like that. And Eckler scored 30, and the Chargers defense scored 20.5, and I won by 0.5 points. They call me the decimal point champ, but I don't care. Because you still got to say champ at the end of it, baby.
Scoreboard.
Literally, dude. But I held that defense based off the conversation I had with Tony and looking at the matchups. Because don't look at just week. Look down a couple, 3, 4, 5 weeks down. And if you can roster them, why not? I picked up that defense 4 weeks prior and held them just for that matchup. And if I didn't do that, I don't advance to the championship. I just, plain and simple, I don't advance to the championship when New England's defense playing for me. They scored 10. The Chargers defense scored 20.5. I don't win.
Keep thinking about what a gut punch that was for your opponent. When someone's defense or their kicker just guts you like that. Oh,
I lost the game. I lost the game last season like that. I lost the game with the Niners. The Niners went on this tear. I think it was against the Rams. There was like a turnover back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And every time the Niners got a turnover on Stafford, who was the quarterback facing me, I was getting minus points on him and my defense was gaining points. But they overturned a fumble on the last, I think the second to last play, went from a fumble to an incomplete pass as he was getting sacked. And I lost the game on that half a point. It was complete
so mine wasn't
garbage.
that. Mine wasn't that, and it was more, Tony, now that I'm marinating on it, because I had Keenan Allen, Eckler, and the Chargers. I had 3 Chargers. I didn't care, though, because of the matchup. So I was down by like 70. It was like 65 or 70 points. Remember, right,
70
Tony?
points. I remember that.
And then Keenan Allen scored like 22. Eckler scored like 30, and the Chargers defense scored 20-something. But the kicker, Sammer, was that they gave extra points for 4th down stops, and I won the game on the last play of the game when the Chargers got a 4th down stop on the Rams.
That is
it was
so
insane, bro. It was like 1 o'clock in the
I would have broken my
I
TV. I would have broken my TV if I was playing against you and that shit happened.
Nuts. You literally lost by
what? You
0.5 on the last play.
Especially if you're like looking at it, you're like, I got this. This is got it's in the bag. You check back in 10 minutes.
Nothing.
What happened?
Sammer, it meant nothing. The Rams were down by like 20 points. It meant nothing, and they went for the 4th down.
Just to waste time. That's that's garbage, dude. You lose like that. That is complete garbage. That's my pro tip. If you lose because of complete garbage, talk shit the entire rest of the league as if you won every game.
Oh, they have. I don't care. They were calling me. They were like, we got Poppy Latte in a body bag. So I changed my name this year as Body Bag Champ. I don't care.
Hell yeah. That's worse than the Thursday stat correction. You didn't even get to sit and marinate in thinking you won for a couple of days. It's that last play. When you end up losing because your quarterback takes a knee and loses a yard and that backs you up. Oh God. Couple other pro tips. Also, you said something about having 3 players from the same roster or from the same team. That's something that you want to try and stay away from. Sometimes you get in a pickle and you have to. And of course, that excludes kicker and defense. They're not really included in that because of the way the points are structured. But just think about it. If you have 3 players from the same team, it's going to be hard for all 3 of them to blow up all in the same game. It has been known to happen, but it's so few and far between. You'd be better off having a receiver with the same skill set, puts up around the same amount of points every week, averages around the same. Stick them in there instead, because they could go off and then your other 2 guys are going to go off. So the stacks work because your quarterback is driving the team. But if you have 2 receivers from the same team, chances of them both scoring multiple touchdowns is
that was the tip you gave me last night that I never really thought about, was having Diggs and Davis on the same team, where you're like, listen, more than likely you're never going to sit Diggs and Davis. It's unlikely that they're both going to score big time in the same week. So I was like, I didn't think about that. So now I have 2 guys that we talked about last night. Great tip that I can now use in the future when guys get injured, trade bait, or move them around now whenever, just to grab guys that, more like a linear move, like you called it, to where it won't hurt anyone's team and won't make my team better, but I won't be stuck with basically a useless player at that point because I'm never going to play him when Diggs is the guy that's getting the lion's share of targets.
Listen, I'm not going to get picked on my own podcast, okay? I only had 3 players from the same team, guys, because of the matchup with the defense, number 1. Number 2, I told you guys what happened in the beginning, right? I had Cortland Sutton, I had Mike Evans, I had Darnell Mooney. So I made a trade, and I traded Cortland Sutton and Dalton Schultz for Keenan Allen and Dallas Goedert, and I have no regrets. It worked out beautifully for me.
Who made that trade?
Well, remember, Goddard was hurt for like 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So he just needed a tight end, period. Okay, and then I wanted a receiver, so I was like, hey, well, rewind back. They were both hurt. Keenan was hurt, and Goddard was hurt, remember?
Yeah.
So I traded him a viable receiver that was playing, not great, in Cortland Sutton, and Dalton Schultz was playing, and I was able to roster them and take the hit because I had depth. But it ended up working out for me.
But Tony, what about a team like the Eagles that has Jalen Hurts, you got AJ Brown, and you got Devontae
Still don't
Smith,
want to do that, bro.
Right?
I still don't.
It's so tempting to just be like, dude, I could get all 3 of these dudes.
Well, sure, and I'm not saying that like in your case, Diggs and Davis, those are both great players. It's not that one isn't a good pick. It's just the probability of them both exploding in the same game, because you're going to have games where
but that example,
Davis had 4
example
touchdowns.
though, compared to the Eagles receivers, like there is a potential for them to both have a pretty good game almost every week, regardless, because of the way they run their offense, the way Jalen Hurts spreads the ball around. Davis and Diggs, I think they're a bit further apart, but you have 2 1A and 1B basically up there with the Philadelphia Eagles. There's a couple other teams I'm sure that you could say the same thing about.
You have a few teams, Miami. You got Hill and Waddle. They can both explode in the same game.
Chris Godwin, Mike Evans,
Buccaneers, Cincinnati.
Why are you laughing, dude?
I hate to admit it. You guys, you throw the Bucs in everywhere, man. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
See that?
How many times have we mentioned K. Dotton in this
Once.
episode?
Undrafted. He's gonna be the most undrafted picked up player in the league. Watch.
All right,
they're gonna make some noise, man. I think people are really sleeping on them this year, especially in that division. The Bucs they're gearing up, man.
I like it.
I love it. All right. So we talked. Don't. Another thing you don't want to do. Don't draft with the intention of trading unless you already have a deal made. If you've agreed on a deal, you've talked to somebody, especially a live draft, it's a lot easier if you can look at the guy right next to you and say, hey, I was really looking forward to this guy. I didn't want to reach for him, but if I pick up this guy this round and throw you him, are you willing to trade? If you have that agreement, then yeah, go ahead. But typically you don't want to draft a player just to trade them away.
I see it every year, Tony. Every year there's a guy in our league that takes 3 quarterbacks. I'm like, what are you doing? It's trade bait.
Well, because it makes sense in your head during the draft, right? Yeah. That you're like, oh, this guy's got great value. Somebody will want him. But then sometimes other owners realize, if I don't take this trade, he's just going to end up having to drop him into free agency anyway. So I'm going to pick this guy up on waivers without having to trade away the player that I like. Because you're wasting a roster spot, and you get stuck there with this player that you're like, I don't want to just let someone else have him for free, but I need to make a move so I can switch this out for my, don't do that.
Yeah.
And this is speaking on that is my last one, and then we can get out of here. If you do that, because I've done that before, same thing. We all you live and you learn. I'm going to take this quarterback because great value, man, and somebody's going to trade for him. Hell yeah. And then you end up rostering them both, and then you end up playing the game, right? The matchup game. Then you're chasing the blow-up game. The guy on your bench blows up, and then you start him the next week, and then the guy that you bench because you started the other guy next week blows up, and then you're just chasing your tail. It's just frustration. Mm-hmm. It's just it's not. I don't like it. I don't want it. No, thank you. No.
All right. Well, I think we've touched on a lot of stuff here. This is a much longer episode than what we're going to be doing throughout the season. Yes. But we had to kind of cover all the bases for all of you out there who maybe are like me, kind of trying to get more into fantasy football, or completely new rookies to this whole thing. So that is Tony. Follow him on Twitter or X or whatever he calls it. We're going to teach him how to properly play with Tuddies at some point. Maybe take him to a Tuddy bar. And, of course, Poppy Latte. Follow him on socials as well. Lots of cool stuff coming on Twitter. And, of course, follow Big Tuddies on Facebook,
Tony,
on Twitter.
What is your Twitter, Tony? Because everybody, mine's right there. Poppy Latte. What is your Twitter so people can follow you?
His is underneath him as well.
FF Tyrant.
Oh, my bad. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we prepared.
I forgot Sammer's driving, bro. What am I doing?
Professional program here. Anyway, you want to follow me for some nonsense? I'm not going to teach you anything about fantasy football, but go ahead and do that because I am hilarious. No joke. I think I'm the funniest human being I've ever met. Anyway, thank you so much. Well. Most humble. Absolutely the most humble. Thank you for joining the first episode of the Big Tuddies Fantasy Football Podcast. Throw those likes in there, subscribe, and leave us questions as the season goes on. We're going to answer your questions, help you win your league, and of course, help you figure out the best way to get those Tuddies in your league.